Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing a part 3 of our Planet Zoo mod case series. I know it's been a long while since I did one of these, but there's not too many people making mods for Planet Zoo, but I thought there's finally enough to really make a nice mod pack with some really interesting species in the game. So today we're going to be starting with a little wee animal in the exhibit. We've got a little creature in here, we'll see if we can find it. Here we are. This is what we call, here he is. It's a pygmy rattlesnake. Let's see if I get there we are, pygmy rattlesnake. Or called Suturus mirialis. So this is a species of venomous snake related to, obviously, pit vipers. It's a endemic species to the southern United States. And there's a few different subspecies recognized, but this one here is just under that umbrella of mirialis. So they're not really too big a snake. They tend to get about 2 feet long at the biggest, 60 centimeters or so. And apparently there's been a couple specimens that have been recorded to be over 80, but a lot of them are kind of just extreme individuals, so usually they get no more over 60. And obviously common names of the species include pygmy rattlesnakes, scale-round rattlesnakes, hog-nosed rattlesnakes, and all sort of things, and as they are endemic to the southern United States, including Florida and Texas around there, and even North Carolina. And they prefer to live in mixed forests, floodplains, marshes, and all that, but even because it's based on the rattlesnake, you can get a very deserty thing. This is where you would not normally find a rattlesnake at all. And yeah, species is doing quite well. No problems in terms of conservation, really. They're under the least concern. And they are very cool. Like other snakes, they tend to just hide out in holes and eat whatever they can. Birds, lizards, insects, all that. And they're actually quite safe to be around. Even though they are venomous, they aren't able to deliver enough to kill a human. But it can be very unpleasant if you get bitten by one. And very similar to other relatives, produces doesn't have any neurotoxins, but produces hemographic venom, which basically prevents clogging, so that means you kind of just bleed out. But yeah, it's a really nice little species. I really like how they did the model of this one. I really like the patterns on it. It looks quite nice. You should be quite happy to have that in your little enclosures there. I really like these little exhibits. Cool to see little animals in the game given some love. Okay, so now we'll be moving on to the next one. Here we have got another cute little boy. We have got a clouded leopard. Isn't he cute? So this is based off the snow leopard, of course. You can see they're really beautiful patterns and such. So they're a medium-sized cat that live in the Himalayan footlands and live around Southeast Asia and China. They're vulnerable, and their population in the wild is believed to be less than 10,000 mature individuals, and some populations don't even have more than 1,000 adults. So they're vulnerable. They could be on the brink of extinction soon if we don't take care of them. And they're very famous for having these really nice patterns, and they also have the longest teeth comparatively out of any cat. They almost look like a pseudo saber tooth. Found across Bangladesh, Thailand, Yangtze River, China, and regionally extinct in Taiwan. And in Taiwan had a subspecies called the Formosan leopard, clouded leopard, which is extinct now. They do like to live in forests. That's why their patterns like this, so they can hide in the underbrush and kill prey. They're also very secretive, like most cats. They tend to live in the trees and are nocturnal, so you really only see them at night. They're very cool individuals, and they tend to eat whatever they can. They'll eat macaques, hog deers, lorises, pangolins, squirrels, pheasants, just whatever they can really get in their hands on that size range. And when they get about 26 months old, that's when they reproduce, and they usually mate between December and March, which I believe is winter in that time. And it isn't really winter in the equator, but yeah, they tend to do that, and estrus lasts about 30 days and gestation lasts about 93. And then initially, like most cats, they give birth to cute little kittens where they have solid spots, but as they get older, the spots turn into like rings to help them better camouflage. And they live for about 11 years on average, but a captive individual lived about 17. And a lot of other species in Asia, they're very susceptible to the wildlife trade because a lot of people want them for their skins and furs, which is believed to be medicines. And a lot of people have been protecting them in their range and breeding them in captivity since they are at threat of extinction because of the hunting. Yeah, a very beautiful animal. Really fun to see a nice little cloudy boy. It's really nice. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next guy. We've got the cutest little boy here. You've got Red River Hog. So, Red River Hogs are quite famous for living in Africa, and they live in pretty much where they can. They prefer to live around swamps. They try to avoid going into rainforests. They like living in swamps and such. They're quite cute, aren't they? And they're famous for their really interesting patterns. They have this reddish-brown fur with these long ears and such. And they're quite famous for zoos. They even put them in with a lot of local gorillas and stuff. They get up to about 115 kilos maximum, between 45 and 115, and stand about 80 centimeters with the tail, tall, with a 145 centimeters long. They have that really thin tail and these tufted ears that makes them look really distinctive. Very similar to wild boar in a lot of behaviour, just rooting around getting what they can. And they like to live on forested valleys, near lakes and rivers. They do live in rainforests, but try to avoid them. And wet desk savannas. They can be found around the Congo, that area. And yeah, they're not too similar from other pigs. They're also crepuscular or nocturnal, which means they like to come out dusk or dawn or at night. And they usually live in small groups around 6 to 10 animals with kind of a harem with a big male and then a bunch of females, even though these larger groups often join up together when there's enough food. And they're very favourite prey for leopards. And the cool thing about them is that when they breed seasonally, like a lot of animals. They around the end of the dry season in February, and in July that's when they start to breed. The estrus lasts about a month, 37 to 34 days around there. The gestation lasts about 120 days, so it's not too long, 2 or 3 months. And then when they have a litter of piglets, they tend to make a nest out of dry leaves and they have a litter up to 6, but they usually have 3 to 4. The piglets are quite cute when they're born. They get up to about 900 grams. And they develop this coat when they're about 6 months old. That's when they start to develop. And their facial markings come around about 2 years old when they reach adulthood. And they live up to 15 years in the wild, so yeah. Very nice little model here. It's really cool to see a little piggy boy. And then here we have got another cool boy. We've got the Somali wild ass, which is a subspecies of the African wild ass that is critically endangered. They live in Somalia, of course, which is a very war-torn country. So it's very hard to do really nice conservation work around there. And we can see there's the female here, and with the cute little foals here. Aren't they adorable? Hang out with the foals. Oh, cute. There's likely not even, there's likely less than 700 living individuals in the wild. That's why they're considered critically endangered. And they usually give, other animals, they give birth in the spring, and foals can get up quickly without the help of the mother. And they're usually weaned after a year old, and then leave their family eventually when they move off to either males that have their own harem herd and that. They're kind of just like a lot of horses just live in a fusion fishing society where they kind of herds will join up and then move away. And while males will have sort of territories that can be quite big, so they can maintain an area, because Somalia is a desert. There's not too many resources they've got to maintain that. They have like a sort of territory and let girls into their harem. yeah, there's a few zoos around the world that have them, but they are, again, critically endangered. So they've been bred to help try and bolster their numbers and bring them back into their native habitat. So people have been really trying to make sure they're okay. But yeah, such a cool animal. Really hope they get their numbers up soon, and all of those other very critically endangered species, which conservation is hard because Somalia is quite dangerous. Yeah, we'll be moving on to next animal. We've got a white rhino. Now this one is probably not one of the better ones, to be honest, but it's cool to finally see a white rhino. We all know white rhinos. They live in Africa, of course, and they are adapted primarily for grazing because of their wide mouth. That's where they get their name, the white rhino, because it's the loose translation from Swahili to wide. So we see the white rhino here has got the very flat snout for grazing, and then the black rhino has a very shorter, long face and with the long lips to help grasp branches. Yeah, there's not too much I can really say at the moment about him. It's just kind of nice to see that we've got another rhino. It's a very famous rhino. And yeah. Along with most rhinos, there's always the problem of poaching, because poaching is affecting all their populations because they're wanted for wool and such, and it's very dangerous that we could be losing. They're probably the most common rhino though. There's about 17,000, I believe, around the world. So they've been well protected. Very beautiful animals though. So yeah, I think we'll move on to the next one here. We've got the Arabian Onyx, or Oryx, which is very similar to Gemsbok in the same group. They actually were extinct in the wild in the early 1970s, but then were released around the 1980s, and there's small populations back. They are quite vulnerable. There's believed to be about 1,000 in the wild and 6,000 to 7,000 in captivity. So there is still a healthy population in captivity at least. So they're safe there. They get to about 1 meter tall and weigh about 70 kilograms. Not very, very heavy. And they have these very distinctive markings around the face. And they like to rest during the heat of the day. And they range up to 3,000 square kilometers looking for food in their habitat, since they live around Arabia, of course, and the Arabian Peninsula. And they get hunted. The only other predator is from wolves, because humans often kill them a lot. Yeah, you got to be careful, and they can live up for 20 years, which is pretty interesting. So found around the peninsula. They're obviously like to graze. There's not too much in terms of browse on the Arabian Peninsula, so they often like to graze on whatever they can, herbs, fruits, tubers, just whatever they can get their mouths on. And they actually can go for several weeks without water, surprisingly. They're able to, they've especially adapted to deal with living in deserts, so that helps them survive. And they usually never really get into big herds. They usually get to no more than 10. And like in other animals, they live in like sex-segregated herds, and then they'll join up. Some will have bachelor herds, some will have harems. It really just depends on what happens, and they have a dominance hierarchy that's changing all the time. And it's believed that these guys are actually one of the many thought of how the unicorns have been thought of, because there's like people saying narwhals and Indian rhinos. One of the ways is people thinking, because if you look at a onyx side on, it looks like it has one horn. So some people believe that could be one of the many origins of the unicorn myth. And yeah, they're a very famous conservation success story, because they were extinct in the wild around the 1960s, and then about the 1980s, once they were breeding them enough in captivity. They were doing pretty well in captivity, and then they released some into the wild, and now they've got their population. As of June 2011, the population was viable with 1,000 Arabian Oryxes in the wild, with 7,000 held in captivity in other places like zoos and wildlife collections and such. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see that this is a very cool conservation success story, and really hope to get more and more of them in the future. It's really nice to see that conservation's doing good work. So here we can see an adult. We'll have a look at a cute little baby for a while. Look at that, look at this, look at that boy. Look at this boy. So cute. Living life. So very cute. So yeah, now we're going to be moving on to the Maasai giraffe. So there's not really too much I can say that's exclusive to the Maasai. They're really just a subspecies or species, depending who you ask, because giraffe taxonomy is very controversial in some areas. It's a species. It's the largest subspecies species that you can find, and they're very famous for just being that large and having these very distinct patterns on them. And yeah, there's probably only about 32,000 left in the wild, and they often move out inside and outside of protected areas, which means they're at risk for predation. They're actually declining quite a bit because of hunting for their tails, which is also believed to have superstitious power in African cultures, so that's obviously very dangerous to them. And yeah, there are a few parks around the world. Well, not around. There's a few zoos around the world, and a few parks in Africa that have been trying to make sure they stay in high numbers. Very cool patterns. And so this one replaces only the male, and it's really nice to see that. And next we got a couple little 2-in-1, we could say. Here we've got. We'll just quickly go over you. Now this is just a quick reskin of the Indian elephant. It's just got its nice colours in. A lot more grey. There's nothing too much change there. But you can see here we have got a really cool new animal that replaces the African buffalo. We've got a gaur. So the gaur is sometimes called the Indian buffalo, and it's one of the largest living bovids. They can get up to about 220 centimeters tall at the shoulder, so that's damn over 2 meters tall. Very, very big animals. Very famous for having this really huge dewlap coming out down from their neck. Very cool looking animals. I personally have a special affinity for gaurs because they're so muscular. They can get up to 1.5 tons, the big males. So they're very, very huge. So they can be found around Vietnam, Cambodia, basically all of Southeast Asia, and they like to live in forests, like evergreen forests and deciduous forests. So they're very much lively-looking forests. They tend to live in herds about 5 to 11, but can join into huge herds of about 50. Like very generally like to hang out in those kind of areas, eating bamboo and whatever they can find. The population has been about 34,000 at the moment. That's the closest one. In some areas their population as low as only a couple thousand, but they're only listed as vulnerable, so they're not doing too bad in general. And they like to come out during the day, and when there's areas with a lot of humans, they tend to come out at night just to be safe. But normally they're usually diurnal. And they live in small herds, living around the swamps they can. And gaur herds are led by an old female, and the adult males tend to be solitary. And obviously, like most animals, big males come around the female herds and try and get a mate. And they are very generalist. They tend to browse and graze on whatever they can find. It's good to be great generalist when you live in a habitat like that. Eat as much grass and stuff as you like. Very similar kind of to a steppe bison. Oh, not steppe bison. European bison, not steppe bison. And the only animals that really hunt them other than humans are tigers and saltwater crocodiles, which often don't usually hunt the big males. They usually try to get a smaller individual. Still very beautiful. And obviously, like a lot of animals, susceptible to poaching and hunting for their meats. And they do pretty good in captivity, which is good. It looks quite beautiful. I really like the muscular look of it. Very wonderful looking animal. This is the female. This is the male, actually. Very nice bird looking. Look at that big dewlap. Really beautiful animal. And last but not least, we have got the African forest elephant. Now this is one of the 2 living African elephant species, and lives in West Africa in the Congo Basin. Loves to live in the rainforests. It's the smallest, reaching about a shoulder height of 8 feet tall, or 2.4 meters. And they live in smaller herds in the Congo rainforest. The reason that they're a bit smaller is because they live in rainforests, and they tend to be a bit more compact, so they'd be easier able to move through the rainforest. So they have, what's different about them, they have these downturned tusks. And the sad thing about their tusks is that sometimes the minerals make them go pink, so they're highly prized by poachers as like rose tusks. So they're highly prized and makes them more susceptible to getting hunted. Though they actually haven't been doing too bad, since considering it's a lot harder to get in the rainforests and find elephants than on the savannah. They're not too different from African elephants. They just live in, instead of living in congregate herds more, they tend to live like a lot more spread out. They tend to meet in clearings and socialize there and just do their own thing. Pretty much just eat what they can. Very important to these rainforests as they spread seeds around and help take care of the rainforest. They're actually also quite as much slower breeding than normal African elephants. They tend to only breed every 5 to 6 years, since the rainforest makes it a little bit harder to support as many elephants. So they tend to breed quite a bit slower, which also makes them even more susceptible to extinction. And they actually live up to 70 years, and like other elephants, males have to deal with must. And along with a lot of these other animals, African forest elephants have to deal with deforestation of their habitat and fragmentation. So they have to move around more to find proper habitat, which is of course dangerous. And poaching is a very big issue for them, along with the bushmeat trade. And yeah, their populations have been stable at least. People have just been keeping their eyes on them. There just need to be more habitat for them and all the other forest animals. Yeah, I really liked how they did this model. It's like a little bit darker, which is really, really nice. I really like these tusks as well. I hope we kind of see them in game, because they're very distinct elephants. It's really nice to have them in a foresty habitat. But yeah, I think that's about it for us. Looks very beautiful. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and obviously like and subscribe of course. It's really nice to get back into the series. I hope to see you around. Hopefully you make sure you get notifications from the bell icon. Really guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.